Did you know you can sponsor Nerd and Tie? That's right, for $20 we'd say your name here and maybe something nice about you. Who knows? Just go to nerdandtie.com, click on the sponsor information, and you can find out more information there. Or you can help support our legal fund by going to gofundme.com/nerdandtie. Read all about our lawsuit there. It's super the opposite of fun. On this episode of Nerd and Tie, we're going to talk about elitism in nerd culture. Yeah, that's a fun topic. But before that, we're going to hit the headlines. DC is ending the Vertigo line, and Evangelion on Netflix is certainly a thing that's happened. Yup. All that and more on this episode of Nerd and Tie. Oh. And welcome to Nerd and Tie, the only podcast on the internet with a dress code. I am one of your hosts, Trey Dorn. Joining me, as always, is the splendiferous Genproc.
What's up?
And the flip-flamdiferous, flang-kickerous, and bang-whifferous Nikazumi.
I must not move away from it in a running direction.
Those are words that he just said. And welcome to this episode of Nerd and Tie. How's the month been treating both of you?
I'm doing better than I was before. Some stuff that was stressing me out is looking like it's going to be resolved, so that's good.
That's good. Things that stress me out continue to stress me out, but I continue to have a positive outlook because things happen no matter what I do. Man. Anyways.
Yeah.
Anyways, now that we've totally digressed into a mess of whatever that was, it's time to move on to the headlines. The headlines. The first and foremost one is that DC Comics, also known as Detective Comics, DC Comics has formally announced that they will be ending their Vertigo line of comics. Vertigo, of course, is a imprint that they started in 1993, mostly to avoid the at the time in 1993 we were still using the comics code, and the Vertigo line was created to kind of shunt off to the side where they could create a more adult set of comics, like Neil Gaiman's Sandman series or like Black Orchid,
Hellblazer,
comics
Swamp Thing,
comics that they wouldn't have to submit to the Comics Code Authority. And so Vertigo was really their and there were TV commercials pushing this. Like, I remember that about how comics weren't just for kids anymore. Now the writings kind of been on the wall for a while that Vertigo was going away. They've slowly been dismantling its editorial independence. It mostly has been shuffled back into the main DC continuity. And you saw that a lot with like the John Constantine stuff.
I feel like they kind of shuffled a bunch of it into main continuity during the New 52. And then, yeah,
it's so like a lot of us have been kind of expecting Vertigo to end for a while. I mean, honestly, the imprint's been around for 25 years. I think part of me was more surprised that they were still using it because, again, Vertigo stopped kind of being its own continuity a while ago.
Yeah, I was kind of confused by that too, because a lot of the people who I talked to were all upset as far back as New 52 era because all of those Vertigo characters got put back in DC continuity, which is, as you know, the way to ruin those characters forever, because those characters simply don't work in mainstream continuity. What's that? The first few volumes of Sandman and all of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing are set completely in regular DC continuity? Nope.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I think that this is. I mean, like, while it was clear that this was going to happen for a while, I think that it is, also, kind of a, you know, it's a big deal. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I think it is a big deal on one hand, but on the other hand, Vertigo always struck me as like the separate imprint for people who had too much of a stick up their butts to admit they read DC comics. So here's a separate imprint that's totally different, you guys. That was my reading of it.
Yeah, well,
Maybe I'm too cynical.
honestly, I think it's just sort of it's one of those things where my personal take, really, on all of this,
Mm-hmm.
is that like it's Vertigo has been dead for a while and it's been gone. It's like the name has lived on, but it hasn't really been Vertigo for like since like 2013.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't want to like. Yeah, that's kind of my like. It's sad that Vertigo is gone, but Vertigo's been gone.
I mean, on that same note, we've had DC started a new sub series for adults anyway in the form of DC Black Label, where we got things like Bruce Wayne's uncensored penis.
We've all seen Bruce Wayne's wiener. We're adults.
Yep.
Singy.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I honestly think that like they made their new Vertigo a while ago with DC Black, and that's really all that regular Vertigo was turning into in the first place. So why not just screw it? I mean, again, they pretty much did all of this already.
Mm-hmm.
Woof. I don't know. I do think it is kind of, sad to see it go in many ways, though. I think that, like there's a lot of history behind the name, and it's not like when they, killed. It's not like when they killed the Impact line, right? Nobody remembers the Impact line. It's, yeah.
Yeah, nothing of value was lost with the Impact line, but yeah.
Except for the Comet. The Comet was fucking amazing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mark Wade's Comet was amazing.
I apologize to Mark Wade's Comet and nothing else.
Actually, I read it. I love the Black Hood also. The Black Hood was hilarious. Well, because I've talked about this before, but the Black Hood is. So obviously the Black Hood, for those people who watch Riverdale, know what the Black Hood is, the name of a character from the Archie comics, but they don't really know because the Black Hood's been several characters in the comics, and never really a serial killer. Like they turned the Black Hood into the serial killer in Riverdale. I'm like, But the Black Hood, so the Impact line of comics, for those who don't know, so there are all these Archie superheroes that Archie Comics did under a couple of different, under Mighty Comics, what they were at the time, I think. But then later Red Circle, when they revived them in like the 60s. But they were just a bunch of like superhero comics that Archie Comics tried to do. In the early 90s, DC licensed all the characters. And they didn't like merge them into the main DC continuity. They created the Impact Comics line. The Impact Comics line was meant to be an accessible, like, for teenagers comics line, right? That was their goal. Something, they didn't want to make it kiddie, but like it wasn't like gonna be like they were simultaneously doing Vertigo. Okay, how about that? It's
okay.
Like, this is around the same time period that the Vertigo imprint launched. So they so they had all these comics like the Shield, who is most notable is the original Archie Comics version, premiered like 2 months before Captain America, and he wears red, white, and blue and has a red, white, and blue shield.
And then they forced Jack Kirby to change the design of Cap's shield, or else they'd sue.
Because Cap's shield, before it was changed into a circle, was pretty much identical.
Mm-hmm.
to their character who came out a couple months. I mean, there were a lot of red, white, and blue superheroes in the 1940s. We don't want to like claim that like yeah, and Captain America came out too closely for either one to have been ripping off the other. It's just that it's a massive coincidence. But there was
Mm-hmm.
also like, but the Comet, who is my favorite. I love the Comet. And I have every issue of the Comet. My wife gave me issue number 2 for our anniversary because it was the only one I was missing. I love
Aw.
it so much. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago. None of these comics are worth any money. Like, just let's be clear. The Impact comics have like almost no collector value. I think like when my wife hunted me down the one issue I was missing, which is issue number 2, I think it cost more to ship it than the actual issue itself. So throughout all, so they had like this whole group of superheroes they were doing, and through what they had was this character, the Black Hood, showing up as this like Punisher ripoff character, right?
Mm-hmm.
This Punisher-esque character, and they had him show up in a couple of different comics to be like, and they were hyping up that they were going to give him his own series, and like they were going to come out with the Black Hood, and they were like coming up with this grim, dark, masked vigilante who like kills like pretty much like the darkest version of the Punisher that has ever been done, a knockoff of that. And then
Yeesh.
the first issue of his comic, they kill him. He dies in the first 10 pages of his own series. And this like 17-year-old kid, it turns out that the hood the Black Hood wears in the Impact continuity like is this like mystical, like had been an executioner's hood, and like whoever wears it like gets like kind of mild like superpowers, like reflexes and stuff like that, and like it's gone down through the ages and worn by heroes after some executioner got like cursed.
Like you do.
Yeah, like you do. But so so issue number 2 is the Black Hood, is the giant letters on the front, "The Black Hood is dead, long live the Black Hood," because it's like this new. But so like they did this whole like build up over multiple issues and all this advertising and all this hype, and then immediately killed him. It was like
I respect that.
it was
No,
like,
I respect that.
oh, it was amazing. I love it. It's just a fun book, and Impact only lasted a couple of years, and I was sad to see that go. But it's just
Yeah.
one of those things.
Yeah, I get it. Huh.
So, now that I've rambled about obscure early 90s comics that nobody cares about but me, but I care a lot about it, I think it's probably time to move on to something else that came out of the 90s.
Oh boy, do we.
Oh boy. So, there's this little series, I don't know if you've heard of it, called Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Nope,
Yeah.
never heard of it.
It's about this boy whose dad makes him climb inside his mom and fight occasionally like giant shapes in the sky, or squeeze a little queer boy to death.
Uh-huh.
That's
Well,
the show.
Jesus.
Also, there's this German girl whose mom killed herself. She's got to climb on in. That's the show. Also, the first guy's mom keeps getting cloned, and she's got to climb into a clone for clone. I don't know. That's the show.
So, this has been a real ride. Like, this has not been like the process of Evangelion, which honestly I still will call one of the most important and like really influential anime of the 90s.
I do think we need to be clear. The people who watch it don't like it. We say it's really important, and I still love the show. It's not as good as people think it is, but also part of it is because Evangelion did a lot of things first that have since become cliche.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, a lot of it doesn't seem as revolutionary now when you look back at it, but it's only because it came out in '94, I think, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I want to say that's right.
I think it got brought over to the U.S. in like '98, '99 for the most part, and so like it's a lot of shows have had a lot of time to crib Evangelion.
Yeah, I'm just imagining what they're that I see most of the people I've seen reacting to the Netflix release have been people who grew up with it and have a strong attachment to it. I'm I would love to see the reaction to it from people who younger fans
Yeah.
who just got off of Darling in the Franxx and then go to see basically what that show stole whole cloth things from.
Well, and it's really
Um,
so Evangelion is in itself a deconstruction of the giant robot series. Like it
mhm.
is playing with tropes that are far less common now. Like it's like a lot of the stuff it was playing with like, with Gundam or like shows like Easter 3 and like all of these like giant robot shows of the more so the giant robot shows of the 80s, but giant robot shows have been going back, decades. Just like so like a lot of the tropes that they're deconstructing in Evangelion have become less prevalent themselves as well. So like if people who start watching Evangelion now without that background in the giant robot anime that say like you that I was raised on, or say Nick, you've watched so much Gundam it hurts my brain. Like
Yep,
but so like
not unfair.
you're more from like it is such a thing, the teenage protagonist who's got to go pilot the giant robot.
The that literally goes back to the first giant mecha anime from the 60s,
Yeah.
Tetsujin 28 Go. It's the teenage child inherits a robot from their father, always from the father.
Mm-hmm.
And then the robot kind of becomes like the symbol of the father's legacy that the child is inheriting. And like, if you really want to get into some weird Asian religious concepts, with animism and the idea that Shinto gods can be inside anything, then it starts getting really interesting. But I don't want
Yeah.
to go into that too much.
Right, but so
But yeah,
yeah.
that's a thing that you just keep doing over and over. But you know, in Tetsujin, it was the father was a good scientist who built robot. In Gundam, it's the father was an absentee father who was kind of a bad person who built robot. And then in Ava, it's the father straight up abusive.
Right. Well, but that's why I think it's important is like until Evangelion is really one of the first big examples of taking this trope and kind of playing it more realistically about what negative impacts that would have on like an actual 14-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychological pressure that that a person's going in, and it's like the depression and the psychological pressure and all of that stuff really comes into play, and it hadn't come into play in most anime. Like maybe you can think of an example, I can't, but like
I mean, like the whole depression, like Ava centers on the characters dealing with depression,
yeah,
because like the whole psychological thing, especially Amuro and Camille in Gundam and its first sequel Zeta Gundam, respectively, they absolutely have serious parental issues and shell shock. But that's kind of an element of a much larger story.
yeah,
Whereas Evangelion, uh, the plot is secondary to the character development,
right, and
rather than the other
yeah,
way around.
yeah, and that's why I thought that the end of the TV series was much more satisfying than the stupid movies. I hate that movie so much. I hate End of Evangelion. I just hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I love the TV series. I hate that movie. But that
That's
aside,
totally fair.
that's a personal preference. That's not what's important here. But I do think that like so when people talk about like how deep Evangelion is, some people like kind of laugh and go like, oh, it's not really that deep. It's just blah blah blah. But it was so revolutionary for when it came out and the moment in which that came out and just sort of the Like, it was unlike anything else, really, while having all the trappings of a very popular genre to hook people in. That's why, like, the whole first season is so, like, the first 13 episodes are so different from the second 13 episodes in that tone. The first 13 episodes are very conventional giant robot show.
Oh yeah, they're very by the book. This Monster of a Week robot show.
Yeah, and then it did, but then
They're well made
oh,
Monster of a Week
absolutely.
robot show.
And
But it's
they
conventional.
hint at the underlying themes, and then, but that's the trick of the show, is it hooks you on that first 13 episodes, and then that's what pulls you into the deeper themes in the second season. Now, I do want to point out that the religious iconography of Neon Genesis Evangelion is 90% just whatever seemed cool at the time.
I actually I was digging through my reference library. I have an Animerica issue from before the first VHS was available, where Gynax representatives literally say that.
Oh yeah.
So before
Yeah.
anyone jumps on us, I will be happy to dig out that interview and read it.
Yeah, it's the show. Anything drawn out of its religious symbolism is pure coincidence, because if you throw enough crap at the wall, eventually some of it will stick. But the emotional depths of the show, I think, is genuine in there, and I think that's where the powerfulness like comes from.
So yeah, like after all that build up, I think it's safe to say I was very excited to be able to like recommend this show to people again, because it was going to be available again after not being in print
been
for a
out
decade.
of print because ADV did the dub originally, and they don't exist anymore, and the rights have kind of floated around. And now, mind you, like, so we've sat with the dub. We've sat with this one dub of the show for 20 years. Like, that's what got re-released. Like, they made edits to it when the DVDs came out to make sure it fit, because when they dubbed the show, the dub, they were using earlier versions of the animation when they did the original VHS dub release that ended up slightly different lengths than the subtitled release of the final, like, home video release in Japan. So for a while, like, they had to modify the dub for the DVD release to make it work. And I think they re-recorded parts of it, but I could be wrong on that. Because obviously with DVDs and Blu-rays, you just have a different audio track to go with the same video. And so they had to modify.
They also had to re-record 4 episodes because there are director's cuts of episodes, I want to say 21 through 24.
Okay, I haven't gotten to... I've only ever watched the VHS copies. I'm gonna tell you the secret is that I've never watched the entirety of Ava. I've watched the entirety of Ava, but I've never watched the entirety of Ava as either the dub or the sub, because it's the VHS tapes and we just watched the episode. So I've some episodes I only watched subtitled, and some episodes I've only watched dubbed. And there are some episodes I've watched both ways.
I'm a little ashamed of how many times I've watched both older releases.
Well, I've just never owned my own copy, which is really but so this dub of Evangelion has been around for 20 years, right? And it's the version we've all lived with. It's as far as and when the rebuilds of Evangelion came out, and they started dubbing those, a large portion of the American dubcast was given the opportunity to come back, and I know that Tiffany came back. And
Tiffany Grant came back as Asuka. Spike Spencer returned as Shinji.
Yeah.
Allison Keith returned as Misato. Amanda Wynn Lee didn't return as Rei, but only because she was taking care of her child at the time.
Yeah, I knew Amanda Wynn Lee didn't come back for the rebuild. But like but that means so Evangelion, again, the rebuilds are a remake of Evangelion that was being worked on, and when those were coming out in the US, we were getting largely the same American voices. So it's like for Shinji and for Asuka and Misato, we've had one English voice for those characters for 2 decades. Right? And so, like, as far as, growing up, I was concerned, there are 2 voice actresses for Asuka, the Japanese one and the American one, and that's it. And the fact is, like, when Tiffany Grant was when the ADV did the original dub, she was working on the translation and actually corrected the German that Asuka said. And like in the dub, so it's like it's very strong like connections to these voices for these characters. Now Netflix, when they decided to release the show, and there's one thing that's gotten a lot of fans annoyed and angry, which it is not a reason not to watch Evangelion, but it's like a lot of us were annoyed because we've had kind of a relationship with these characters, with these voices for 2 decades. In some cases, like because we like all three of us have worked conventions. I've met Tiffany Grant on multiple occasions. I've like she is the sweetest human being on earth, and she will like remember you from a conversation and you hadn't seen her for 10 years, and she'll know who you are immediately. And she's a very nice person, and she is effectively the sweetest person working in the anime con scene, in my opinion. I will fight people over Tiffany Grant, but like, so when Netflix optioned the rights to Evangelion, they didn't even offer they didn't even ask or even offer them to the original English cast to audition. Like,
I've according to Amanda Wynn Lee on her Twitter, they found out that it was getting redubbed after reportedly after Netflix was already a ways into it, and they were like given a symbolic offer of a chance to audition, but with the timing of when it was announced and when they were asked to send their audition tapes in, it was probably after they'd already made the decision.
If I was Tiffany Grant, I would just send in a box set of Evangelion. But I don't know. Like, you're asking someone to re-audition for the role they played in those exact episodes. You know exactly what that actor's going to sound like.
Uh-huh.
Like, you don't need it. Anyways. But so that's why a lot of us are mad. But there was the thought that, like, that maybe that, I'd still maybe watch the subtitled version. Because, I still, like, I've got a strong connection to the Japanese voices as well. Because, as I said, I had a weird experience of watching it flipping back and forth between the dub and sub. But there's a little bit of controversy over some of the subtitle choices in the later half of the series.
There's more than a little bit of controversy, but
I'm being polite and trying not
I know,
to spoil it. So
but I have a lot to go over, even with the basics of the dub script. It's bad.
There is what is very clearly in the original dub and subtitles a very queer moment, and while the literal translation of what the character is saying in words doesn't match those subtitles, the intent and the just based off of cultural subtext and clues from the way that the character is coded and portrayed in the anime, it's a pretty overtly queer moment. Like, it is. So that's without spoilers. It's not a huge moment. We're talking about the alteration of maybe 2 or 3 lines, but it's a very, like, these are 2 or 3 lines that were kind of vital to the queer coding of the character.
I don't know. I would call it a huge moment, but that was like,
well, no, it's what I don't
mean. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, it's emotionally a huge moment. What I'm saying is that, like, the change that changes that moment was small.
That's fair. There's other weird problems with the translation. That's the big one. That's the big one. The script is extraordinarily awkward. It's very precise, exact translation from Japanese to English, to the point that the way that the characters are speaking is extremely stilted.
In the dub or the sub? I mean, obviously in the sub, but is it also that way in the dub?
In the dub, yeah. The dub is bizarre. No one is talking in a normal way. At the behest of Kara, and I've been doing a lot of research into this, and I know how much of this was, from what I can tell, these weren't decisions made by Netflix. These were made by the Japanese side of things.
Really?
The translator who wrote the script for both the English dub and the subtitles Netflix are using is a man who works directly for Kara, not for Netflix. So he is working for Hideaki Anno's company. Other weird translation issues include using third children to refer to Shinji in the singular. And the same going for the other Eva pilots. Asuka is referred to in the singular as second children. Rei, first children. This is Shinji Ikari, the third children.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
I'm not kidding you. This is actually in the translation. And this translator's scripting, you first started seeing his weirdness in Evangelion movie 3.33 in the Rebuild series, which some people might remember that dub was recorded back in 2014 initially. It was released in theaters, and when it ran at Otakon, the audience was audibly reacting to it, sometimes laughing to the more queer-coded moments. And apparently some folks at Kara were mortified. Anno himself reportedly stepped in and forced Funimation to re-record the entire dub with a new script from the ground up.
Wow.
3.33 also has this awkward, stilted script, but it has the original voice cast on it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been doing almost nothing but research this for like the past 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, like it's really tempting, and people really want to say this was Netflix's screw up. And to an extent, there are things that are Netflix's screw up in this adaptation. Somehow they apparently didn't have the rights to the money to pay for the rights to Fly Me to the Moon.
That's just money.
Which is baffling to me, but still.
Fly Me to the Moon is an expensive song in the U.S., and the only reason why it's still in the Japanese versions that are in print is because of the difference in licensing laws in Japan and America. And also, frankly, it's just a far less valuable song in Japan than it is in the United States.
I mean, that's fair, but like...
I figured that was just Netflix being cheap. And actually, like, as much as I love, like, you know, that terrible version of Fly Me to the Moon... it's like that like I could live without that. Like every other change
as a proponent of film restoration, I completely disagree with you, but okay.
Well, no, it's but that's an ongoing problem with streaming is that everything
it's
has
not
to
just
be
the
relicensed.
closing song though. It's used in the show diegetically, and it's removed there too.
Oh well, that sucks.
So yeah. It's really a problem. It's defacing something. If you
can tell,
ask
I
me.
haven't watched the show for like 15 years.
I don't know. It's a weird translation. It's a weird call. I don't know what Kara's whole deal is in its entirety, but a lot of it's just a bad look. I mean, it was awkward enough for Netflix that they were losing that iconic song.
Yeah.
But then the translation is awkward. Then you have these moments of queer erasure that look bad, especially launching the show in the middle of Pride Month.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, let's erase the overtly queer moment during Pride Month. Oh my god.
And then there's the added fear in the fandom that, remember, Rebuild of Evangelion movie 4, the final movie, hasn't been released yet. So now the fandom is worried that does this mean that the fourth movie is Funimation going to get the rights to it? Will the original dub cast come back for the fourth movie? Or how much sway does Kara have?
Yeah.
Is the fourth movie going to have a completely different English cast? Yeah. This is... Are we going to keep with this awkward, stilted, kind of hard to listen to translation? Yeah. This is all on the table now.
Yeah. So that's a thing. That is a thing that is happening. That is Ava. We should probably move on, though, because we're a half hour into this episode and haven't gotten to the big topic.
Fair.
But yeah, so Evangelion, it's a fucking mess. Pardon my language. That's the only one I get for this whole episode.
You already did one.
Oh, well.
That's your second one.
That's the only other one I get for this episode. If you can count how many times Trey has sworn in any episode of Nerd and Tie, go to nerdandtie.com/contact and tell us.
I swear we should have a counter.
Let's get a little bell that goes ding.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to our big topic, and that is elitism in geekism. Elitism in the geek community. It's a bad thing. Discuss. Because we're not being elitist about Evangelion. It is a verifiably worse version of Eva. I mean, okay, so visually it's a better version of Eva because it's been remastered beautifully for the screen. But we're not being elitist when we say that the original dub is better just because it was better.
No offense to the new cast, by the way. Most of them are doing fine.
Well, and
they're fine.
And that's why, like,
it's not their fault either.
I'm gonna say, like, I wasn't gonna like hold it against. I've never nobody hold it against the new cast. I'm angry that they chose not to bring back the cast who's been on every version of Eva since it got brought stateside.
But that's not on the actors.
But that's not the actors' fault. Actors take a job, they do a job, they get paid. Word. So, but we're going to talk about elitism and pretty much about how so many members of the geek and nerd communities are a bunch of snobs.
Oh boy, where do we begin?
Again, you were talking about something on Facebook with video game controllers before the show.
Yeah, and video game elitism has been around for freaking ever. And it's just a big old dumb thing. What really started me on this thread was a picture of, a bunch of various retro controllers being held and numbered with like Atari being one, and going through all the old ones and saying like, oh, which one did you start on? It was just a cute little thing to get people to start like talking about, oh, I started on this and I started on that and da 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 da.
And most of that should be determined by how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes.
Well, right, but like for the most part,
For the most part, yeah. And of course, people can't help but share this picture and then add text that says, you're not a real gamer if you didn't start on this number or before. And it's like, excuse you.
Didn't you know people have a great deal of control over, one, when they are born, and two, what income bracket they're born into?
Exactly.
Right.
Like, that's a stupid thing to be gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Like, and so it just got me on this thought process of, most gatekeeping is really, really stupid. And it's done by people who, probably don't have much in their lives to be proud of, except for like, oh, I'm special because of this obscure, reason that nobody really cares about. But I'm going to make people care about it because, oh, I need to feel special.
Yeah, I think that there is this unfortunate phenomenon where people who people who were not necessarily, like, a lot of us were bullied. I was bullied, but there are people who, what their takeaway from that was that they need to feel important about something else instead of just actually finding self-worth and value, and therefore just turn it around that, like, this is the thing that makes me better because I went here instead of there. And it's hipsterism to a degree. I really, like, I have the ability, being an old, comparative to a lot of the people who do this, like being as I'm 38, And my first video games were played on a Commodore 64 with a 1-button joystick. You know, it's I can always geek cred most people if they try to play the I'm better than you thing, but it's all bullshit, man. It's like I was born like we had a computer in the 80s, man. Like I got the NES later than everyone else. I skipped the 16. I have never at any point in my life owned a Super Nintendo. Haven't.
Same
See,
though.
but I can match you. And I'm a good 10 years younger than you. I started on the Commodore 64.
Were the friends knocking down your door to play with your Commodore 64?
No,
It's an old
but
Commodore
I
64
distinctly
commercial.
it was my dad's. We still have it.
Yeah.
I just need to fix the disk drive.
Oh,
But, like,
really? So those Commodore 64s, they have a problem where the chips will heat up and unseat themselves and like fry out. So I will say that what you're going to want to do if you ever plug that thing back in is you're going to want to get a protector for the power. So what kills most Commodore 64s is the power brick.
Okay.
And so there's a device that you can put between the power brick and your Commodore 64 that'll keep it from shorting out your Commodore 64. I know that there's some people who make it.
Because it seemed fine when I tried it one time. I was back at my folks, and I did like plug it in, see if I could work anything on it, and the only problem, like, it runs beautifully. The only problem is the disk drive doesn't want to read the discs. Yeah. And it just kind of sits there and whirs.
Well, yeah. So you probably have a disk drive problem. Might just be the drive It depends on which version of the disk drive you have, because there's a couple different versions. The Commodore 64 disk drives are interesting because they have like effectively a whole other computer in it, because that was Commodore's solution. That's why they're so big compared to like the Apple II disk drives of the time. But I will say, yeah, it's so the danger is that your power brick might fail, and so like I think that the thing you fit between the power supply and the Commodore, it only costs less than $20 if you can find it. So
yeah, I'll look into it because I wanna fix that thing up and play Tink Tonk in the land of Buddy Bots again.
I used to play a lot of Trek 64 and Creeps.
My dad
Creeps
had
was a knockoff of Space Invaders.
Oh, my dad had a buttload of text RPGs.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, because he was big into like D&D, so he had a bunch of games like that, and he also had Tetris.
Ooh, I had Kickman on cart. I had Rebel Bomber's a great game. A little thing where you're playing. I know it's based off another game, and I forget what it's called. Like Rebel Bomber's a ripoff of some other game that existed for like the Atari games. So it's like a little plane going back, and every time you hit the right side of the screen, it goes one line down lower on the left side and continues. You've got to drop bombs and destroy buildings. And if you crash into a building, you die. But yeah, it's. Anyways, we're talking about elitism.
I was gonna say, and there's something that I have trouble relating on because despite my age, I didn't grow up with video games. So my first like proper console was a PlayStation 1 when I was 13. So yeah.
I mean,
well, yeah, and you know what? Like, it's funny because I watch a lot of retro game channels on YouTube because it's fun, and that's my only explanation. And like one of the shows I was watching, the guy was talking about how like the N64 was his first system as a little kid, and I was just going, well, I feel old, but that doesn't make me better that I started out with a Commodore 64 and a Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
like you have to understand, like there are kids today whose first console was the Wii.
It's true.
Like, you can't be mad at people for growing up in the time they grew up in. You just have to acknowledge that they're living in a different era, like they're literally living in a different world than you grew up in, and just respect other people.
I do want to say that part of this elitism that I see, I do think comes from insecurity. Yep. Like it's not just I need to be better than someone, it's that I'm insecure about the thing I like not being taken seriously. And a lot of my favorite fandoms have huge problems with this. In fact, I think, um, okay, hot take coming in. I think that the Chris Nolan Batman movies get way more credit than they deserve.
The first one's
Partly
pretty
out,
good.
I also like Batman Begins, but I think by and large the entire trilogy, especially Dark Knight Rises, because that's a steaming pile of crap,
It is terrible.
gets way more credit than they deserve because it's Batman, but he's super serious this time, guys. This isn't a kiddie thing. This isn't for little kids. This Batman is very serious business. That is the like that's like you like we don't have a Robin in this because this Batman is serious business.
That's what drove me nuts about the Nolan movies. Is it's like Batman Begins is a great year one movie. You know what I mean? It's a great early Batman, but the most notable thing about Batman is that he keeps adopting fucking orphans. Third time. It's
Bing.
he keeps adopting orphans. He's a bat dad. He's
Yeah, it's like his defining character trait, and but at large, people ignore that part partly because it's that insecurity thing of, oh God, if we had a sidekick, who would take this movie seriously?
Yeah.
Similarly, I was on this kick earlier today, so please forgive me in that regard.
Yeah.
Godzilla.
Oh no, there goes Tokyo.
I absolutely loved the new film, Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Oh God, same.
I understand if people didn't enjoy the film, if it wasn't their cup of tea, that's fine.
I've seen some really weird takes on that movie. So I
sorry, I just want to get this out there first though. But if your argument is, well, it's not unlike the original 54 film, this isn't an environmental allegory and Godzilla is played as a hero and friend of the military, therefore it's not really Godzilla because it's not like that movie. That to me is just elitism. That is a bizarre take, especially when Godzilla has been in 35 movies and all of 3 of them actually fit that criteria. So,
are you including the Roland Emmerich?
I was not including the Roland Emmerich.
Because I think you should. Because the Roland Emmerich one, it's all about the negatives of radiation. Godzilla is scary. The military is against him. Now, I know that monster has been retconned into a separate kaiju.
But still, yeah, it is a Godzilla
time,
movie.
They were making a Godzilla movie, as far as they were concerned.
So
that
a
was
little
very much
over
in the vein of the first one.
So about 11% of the movies actually fit that criteria.
And it's the worst American Godzilla.
It is. And it's one of the worst of the entire franchise, frankly.
I will say, what I loved about Godzilla King of the Monsters was that I feel like, unlike the 2014 Godzilla, that the people making the movie finally figured out what kind of movie they were making. Like,
oh yeah,
it all goes at the end where like it. So when I'll say when my wife Krista and I were driving to the drive-in to see Godzilla King of the Monsters, because of course we saw Godzilla King of the Monsters at a drive-in. You gotta see Godzilla at a drive-in. We saw Godzilla 2014 at a drive-in at a different one, but yeah. So when we're driving to the drive-in, because we live about an hour away from the drive-in we go to, because it's hard to find a drive-in. It's about an hour drive, and on the way, my wife Krista was commenting that it would be perfect if they ended the movie with the Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla. And I just responded, they'll never do that. And then the end of the movie hits. And it's the Serge Tankian cover of Godzilla.
Dude,
and I was
Serge Tankian doing a cover as arranged by Battlestar Galactica's Bear McCreary.
Well, Bear McCreary did the soundtrack for the whole movie.
Yeah, but he also did that rearrangement, so I'm giving credit.
And so it just started it was just this moment of elation and ecstatic celebration in our car as we're sitting at the drive-in. But it's
Well, I'm going to say this. I've noticed that, and I think I see a little bit of this in the critic sphere too. And no, I'm not going to delve into that. Oh, the critics don't get it, because that's usually just anti-intellectualism bullcrap. But I have noticed that some critics and some people I talked to were very easy on the 2014 movie, which I think was a much stupider movie than King of the Monsters. But the 2014 movie did everything with a dour, serious face. So I think that made people not notice that it was a kind of a really stupid movie.
That's the weirdest take I kept seeing was like, oh, the humans are so much worse in King of the Monsters than they were in 2014. And I was like, what movie were you watching?
The humans in
Godzilla
2014 didn't have personalities.
Yeah, I didn't care about any of them. In like, once Bryan Cranston's out of the Godzilla 2014, none of the humans, like, you don't give two craps about any of them. With Godzilla,
also, may I just add, you're watching a kaiju film.
Right.
Why the hell are you watching a kaiju film for the people?
Well, and
go on.
I'm sorry. I think humans are an important element to a Godzilla film because they ground the film, and they're a relatable point of view. Because honestly, if you do a kaiju movie from the point of view of the kaiju, they become less threatening than if you have humans even if just a few scenes of humans on the ground that you care
understandable
about.
For the making of the movie, but as an audience member, like, you want to see the big monster.
Well, yeah, you want to see the big monster, but you need to have context. And you also, when those humans are on the ground, you need to have them, like, you need to have an emotional connection to those characters so you feel frightened for them.
Like, I think it's that it's not that human characters are a bad part of kaiju movies, but I do think bad human characters make the rest look bad. Like, I could write a paper about the original Dr. Serizawa from the 1954 movie. I could write you a 5-page paper just on him. I'm not even kidding. Friggin' Miki Saigusa from the 90s movies, she had a pretty major arc between Biollante and Destroya when she had her last appearance. The Millennium Political Action Squad from Shin Godzilla, I cared about all of them.
I haven't actually seen Shin Godzilla yet. I need to.
If you like Evangelion and you like Godzilla, then you will definitely like Shin Godzilla.
It's Hideki Anno making a Godzilla movie, yeah.
Uh-huh. But it's very Evangelion flavored.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. There's a very distinctive vibe to Eva that, yeah. But like people telling me how great the 2014 human characters were in comparison to King of the Monsters just blew my mind, because King of the Monsters uses some tropes, like it's like by just having the father connected to the daughter and then like the family relation, it is a shorthand. It is a shortcut to establish family relationships between the characters and why character A cares about character B and why you get invested in character A doing things because of character B. Like that, it was a shortcut, but it was a successful shortcut that meant we didn't have to dwell on spending 20 minutes developing that relationship. You immediately know, and you can do it in a 5-minute scene.
Also, can we... one I like to point out when talking about Godzilla 2014, that movie does spend 20 minutes, 20 goddamn minutes, setting up that Quicksilver has daddy issues with Walter White. Like, that is literally the only character arc they set up for the entire movie. And then once Walter White is gone, no one has an arc.
Yeah.
2/3 of the movie, not a single one of those characters grows or changes as a person, because the only arc they set up is done away with before the first act is over.
Yeah, and his sister wife looks worried a lot.
Uh-huh. Oh.
It's so weird because Elizabeth Olsen plays his wife.
Mm-hmm. It's
so weird. Like, actors playing roles, but it's still weird. But that's why it's like with King. I thought King of the Monsters hit the right balance though. Like, but because it had a lighter tone with the humans, like it's Bradley Whitford is hilarious in Godzilla King of the Monsters. You know, it's when he like Hollow Earth, I knew it. Like just so excited about that, and then like
That said, although kind of bouncing off of what you said though, Gen, I do think some of the elitism did come through in some of the way that people looked at the movie, because when I hear people say that there weren't engaging characters, I think when they say that, they're not thinking of the four monsters as characters.
Agreed.
And Godzilla, just Godzilla, Ghidorah, and Mothra on their own have so much body language. They are characters. They're just expressing things non-verbally.
Yeah.
Rodan's kind of flat.
Rodan's kind of flat. That's why I didn't mention him. But like,
but like, yeah, like you go back to like Gamera, and like you understand Gamera, like
Well, he's a friend
Yeah.
of children.
yeah.
Well,
yeah,
and
he's a good character.
I love Gamera. Gamera, it's a part of my contrary. So I will admit that like I don't consider I don't think I'm guilty of being that snobbish with my geekdom. I think I'm pretty good about being accepting and open. But I will admit I have always had a minor contrary impulse when it comes to like who my favorite kaiju is, who my favorite doctor is, like all of this stuff. Like, I used to always say that Paul McGann was my favorite doctor because he was no one else's favorite doctor. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
I'll tell you the truth. Tom Baker's my favorite doctor. I was lying. I love Paul McGann's doctor. He's still like one of my favorite doctors, but Tom Baker's was secretly my favorite. But in like 2002, if you told a Doctor Who fan that, you know, Tom Baker was your favorite doctor, they'd be like, same. But if you said Paul McGann, they'd be like, really? And I'd be like, yeah, because he's good. But it's the same reason why I've always said that Gamera is my favorite kaiju, because everybody goes for like the Godzilla mythos and not the Gamera mythos for their favorite kaiju, right? It's
Oh, that's fair.
even though most Gamera
And then there are
movies,
some,
even though most of the Gamera movies I've only seen the MST3K version of.
and then there's some of you uncouth barbarians out there who go for the Ultraman kaiju. I don't even know what's going on with you guys.
I mean, if you really want to be a hipster, you say Frankenstein.
No, you want to be really bad. You be like me and say your favorite kaiju is Clifford the Big Red Dog.
You're not wrong. Not wrong.
Not technically wrong. But that's
I'm gonna kaiju means literally strange beast. I'm counting it.
when I used to make video game videos on YouTube, they were all about the 3DO. To be fair, I have a bizarre love of that system. That's actually a genuine love, my love for the 3DO. I love the 3DO intensely. In my office right now, you can't see it, but my Switch, I have a Switch dock in my office and a Switch dock in our living room. My Switch is currently in my office Switch dock, which sits on top of my 3DO.
You know, and that's always the interesting thing, is like managing and wondering, because I do sometimes wonder that myself, if my country, because I also have that contrarian impulse sometimes. Like,
No, really?
well, obviously, but like, sorry.
No, it's like we all have it, like for sure. And it's fine to want to be unique in your likes. It's fine to want to be the odd one out, but it's not okay if you use that to bash other people and
Yeah.
their likes.
No, absolutely.
That's perfect.
That's what we're saying here. Is don't yuck their yums.
Well, and it's really like there's this whole like you can see it through and through, and again, it comes down to insecurity with the Gamergate movement that happened in 2014, and kind of this toxic video gamer like and all these people like it becomes tribalism. Like they want to gatekeep not just because it makes them feel superior, but because it makes them feel special and part of an in-group. And if anybody can join that in-group, they feel like they're less special.
Yep.
And it's and it ends up manifesting itself in all sorts of misogyny and, you know, homophobia and transphobia and all this stuff and a lot of negative things. which is really frustrating, especially considering that this is the community that a lot of us who don't quite fall inside the norms found welcome in. But like that's the like when you develop your tribe and then you want to try to gatekeep people out of that tribe because the more people who they let in, the less special they feel. It's like this whole like the comic fans who get judgy about like people who just get into the Marvel characters through the movies. Like it's okay if I've never read an Iron Man comic in my life. I'm not gonna lie. I have not picked up a single issue of an Iron Man comic ever. I was a comic collector in the 90s. The only Marvel books I ever bought involved Wolverine, the X-Men, or Spider-Man. I've never read a Thor comic.
Same. I can honestly say the same on that one.
I do want to say that I am very proud of what's been going down in the cosplay community per elitism. Because you'd always get this like, oh, you're cosplaying that character. Oh, I want to cosplay them too. We shouldn't cosplay them at the same time. And that's turning into, oh my god, we love the same character. That's awesome.
I'm so glad that's becoming more common.
Yeah. And like we're pushing for like no longer like gatekeeping perfectionality, making your costume the most authentic. It's becoming more like you do you and we will still love it and get your character and see how much you love that character. It's cosplaying for the love of it, not just
my god.
because of like how you look, how good your cosplay technically is. It's just we all love these things. Let's love them together.
In my experience, I have formed a small but very supportive friend circle through cosplay Instagram, just through a bunch of people who cosplay the same Fate character I do.
Right? Like
that's the main thing we had in common, of all of us cosplay that same character, and a lot of us are from different backgrounds, body types, gender identities, but we all like Ishtar. So like
there you go. And like I just hope that we can, keep pushing this non-elitism train forward and
Same.
push it like into the other areas of geekdom where it is sorely needed.
Yeah.
A frickin' man.
So I think that's probably a good time to wrap up this topic.
Seems good to me.
So we have no mailbag this episode, unfortunately.
Let's read a book instead.
I blame Langland. So what I'm going to do is move on to the Vomit Hat Steve Challenge. The Vomit Hat Steve Challenge, for those of you who don't know, is every episode I read a line from a book, and the challenge to you, the listener, is to guess what book I am reading from. If you guess correctly, you get included in our Hall of Awesome. The benefits of the Hall of Awesome are as follows. 1, we put your name on our website. 2, I read your name on air on the show. 3, we won't put a live beehive in your car at any point, we promise.
Oh no, the bees, my eyes!
All right, so the current members of the Hall of Awesome are as follows. Archimite, Zero, Rin Ancenti, Cheesy McDamu, Krista, Slithery Shameless Otaku, The Random Ramblings Man, Core Fan, Capito, Chris Graham, Lilysaurus, Paper Godzilla, Cavsy, The Minnesota Librarian, Sean Orange, Keith Shizuo, Sakura Sunset, Joel Kreisman, Patrick Delahanty, and Wonderland Hearts. And I started a new book last episode. I'm going to continue to read from it since we've had no guesses yet. And I'm going to open to a random page. And I'm going to I'm going to pick a random line here. I'm going to pick... She was shameless. She spoke quietly. She didn't declaim or raise her voice. and when a sob took her, it was muffled almost into a hiccup, as if she were stifling her emotions for the sake of courtesy. If you know what book that's from, go to nerdandtie.com, click on the contact form, and tell us. Or if you'd like to have your words featured in our mailbag, go to that same form, tell us your thoughts, tell us your dreams, tell us what kind of snobby things you're sick of, tell us your favorite part of Godzilla, tell us exactly what Gen should do about that thing in her closet. Go to nerdandtie.com/contact and tell us there. Or if you want to have your actual voice heard on the show, you can leave us a voicemail by dialing 414-375-0480 and leaving a voicemail on the line. And if we find that you swear less than I do, we might play it on the air.
Works for me.
That's very exciting. So, with that, as we approach the end of our episode, I want to say thank you all for tuning in. I am Trey Doran.
I might be Nick Izumi.
And I was Gen Proc.
And remember, you can follow this show on Tumblr at nerdandtie.tumblr.com, on Twitter at nerdandtie, on Facebook it's facebook.com/nerdandtie. And remember, you can support the show in a couple of different ways. First off, we do have a legal fund at gofundme.com/nerdandtie, or for $20 you can sponsor an episode. Or if you want to go a different route, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/TRAEGORN. Nick has a Patreon at patreon.com/NickIzumi. And again, sell stuff on the internet under Ocelot Dude Designs. And just Google that and find cool pillows. The succulent pillows are amazing. And
I'll get them on the Etsy store, hopefully after Kitsune, if they don't all sell out.
See? Also, you should find Gen at KitsuneCon. Where you can
find me at KitsuneCon, too.
Find Nick at KitsuneCon, because we're probably not going to do an episode until after that. In fact, we might end up doing a best-of next month. Who knows? I will say Nerd and Tie is a network of shows. Besides this, our flagship podcast, there are other shows on the network. One of the shows you can check out is Stormwood and Associates. Stormwood and Associates is an RPG actual play podcast taking place in a fictional world where elves and wizards, take the subway. It's set in San Ricardo. They follows the licensed private detectives, bounty hunters, and licensed mage agency Stormwood and Associates, led by Raz Stormwood, and a bunch of people try to not break the world whenever possible. Every week there's a new episode, and you can find it at nerdandtie.com/Stormwood. Check it out. It's pretty great. And yeah. Those are all words that made sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say so.
And just a treat, if you're following along, Nick's going to GM 2 episodes coming up this week and next.
I'm excited.
And if you know the obscure myths and urban legends around Wisconsin-founded hardware stores, you might get really dumb jokes.
Mm-hmm. You might get my really petty.
It's an amazing thing. All right, thank you guys for tuning in to Nerd and Tie, and
have a good night, fam. Keep on spocking in the free world.
Yeah. Or not. It's your choice. It's your body. And remember, in your dreams, your hearts, your soul, somewhere deep down inside, you are a person. Even if you forgot that one day that you were a person, you are still a person. And because of that, you can change, you can grow. You cannot grow wings. That is illegal in 48 of 50 states. I'm not going to tell you which ones it is legal in, but it's definitely not legal in Canada either. So don't grow wings. Just buy wings and tape them on your back. That's the only safe way to have wings. But other than that, you're a person. And you should take the opportunity to look into your life, look into yourself, look into the closet, and find that shirt you forgot you had, put it on your body, and remember why you stopped wearing it like the rest of us did. It's important that you don't wear that shirt. Wear the other one. You know, the blue one? No, the other blue. Yeah, that one with the pattern. Yeah, no, that one's the one you look good. Why are you fighting with me on this? It's just wear that shirt. Wear that one. What is even happening right now? Why is this a conversation we're having? Just listen to me on this.